Hey Chad. So recently I was thinking about actual good horror movies and I ended up having a flashback to literally everyone talking about the It movies a few years back, as people had regarded them as some of the scariest, most well-written horror movies of all time. And out of curiosity to see what society was talking about, I went on one of the many streaming services it was on and watched the first movie, which I've heard being hyped up like crazy, and it was just kind of fun. The movie was definitely something I could understand the hype around, especially among the majority of other horror movies that will be marked as a masterpiece classic as long as it has blood rather than an actual film, but it was definitely something interesting. The strongest parts of the film was definitely its concepts rather than how it was utilized. Horror movie with a shape-shifting, genuinely creepy clown who feeds off of fear with the main characters being pussy-ass kids going through severely traumatic events portrayed in a mature way is honestly extremely unique and interesting concept. Also, before I say any more, I'm in fact aware of the movies being based off of the book. However, I'm not sure how much of it is used from the book, as it's at least 1,000,000 pages. So as to be time efficient and fair, I will be acting as if the It movies are its own thing. But even if the concept is very interesting, it feels as if the things that work only apply to certain sections, as the worst parts of the movies are by far the ones that end up getting too scared of being too different, such as the sound design, soundtrack, and the movie has some, in fact, very bad conveniences that will usually have an excuse of ambiguity, such as the kids being stupid because they're kids, despite kids not being that stupid, and them being shown to be very capable in other segments. And even though the main members of the cast are pretty strong and well written, as Pennywise, Bill, and Beverly are by far the best parts of the movie, the rest of the main cast just kinda sits there and also takes up the runtime with stuff nobody ever actually cares that much about. And then literally everyone else are genuinely the most stereotypical high school caricatures alive, especially when it comes to the bullies.
Are you in there by yourself, Beaverly? Or do you have half the guys in the school with you, huh, slut?
2 Oscars!
However, for the actual horror parts that the movie is, about, are for the most part actually really well done, and Bill Skarsgård did a pretty great job playing Pennywise, as him as a villain is extremely threatening anytime he's on screen, and for when his character's entire thing is to invoke fear, he's pretty understandable in that role. However, even if he's pretty good in terms of believability in the universe, how it's portrayed in the movie is usually not very scary at all, as whoever was in charge of the sound department in both of these movies needs to be banned from every future project, because dear god, every horror scene in this movie unironically is more scary when played on mute, as it constantly is just playing sound effects or playing really loud music and cutting before a jump scare that was then ruined as it's just waiting before a loud noise goes inside of your ear. It's bad. But other than that, the horror scenes are for the most part pretty well done and are creative, with the only other glaring flaw kinda just being how the more Pennywise is shown, the more that all of the kids are shown to have the most insane plot armor ever. As for only them in particular, people try to scare for 800 more hours just for something to happen to him, while refusing to actually kill one of the main members for no reason other than that they wanted a scary scene in the movie without consequence, which kind of diminishes the care and genuine effort that it took to actually bring the other elements of the scene together. But despite everything, I do think It Chapter 1, even if it's extremely overrated, is definitely a welcome film to the horror genre. 4.5 out of 10. And that brings me to It Chapter 2. So despite me saying that the first It movie is slightly below average movie, the second movie makes me want to revoke all of my statements and call it a masterpiece. Because goddamn, It Chapter 2 is so insanely bad. After I'd watched the first movie, I kinda was just a bit underwhelmed and went to go watch the second, and 30 or so minutes in, I just couldn't keep watching, and didn't think much of it other than how ugly the poster monster looks, but I went back to it and the fucking boredom that was coursing through my veins was unfathomable. I genuinely don't know what is from the book or not, as I know the films are based off of the book, but this is just straight up not the same story. So again, despite the first movie not always being the most consistent in its logic or at the best pacing, this movie is genuinely the slowest fucking thing ever, and not in like a Better Call Saul art film type way, more like a 2 hours of flashbacks type way. And when I say that the majority of this film is surrounded by flashbacks, I mean that. So the movie is structured like this. First act, 35 minutes going one by one of the characters, 30 years later getting a call and getting told, "Hey, Pennywise, Derry," and them making a shocked face until they meet up in Derry, and then the next about 2 hours in this 3-hour-long movie consist of a character going into a recognizable place from the first film, and then they will either have something scary happen to them for 10 to 15 minutes, or have a flashback from 27 years ago to a scary thing for also 10 to 15 minutes, and this happens 6 different times in a row. And genuinely, the only times that this isn't happening is a completely unrelated scene of Pennywise going, I'm very scary and I love killing someone in the least creative scenarios ever is my favorite thing to do. And despite all of this literally being the safest, most creatively bankrupt way to make a horror film, they still managed to fuck up every single department ever. Now, when you make a horror film and have the big scary thing, the main thing you have to have with the big scary thing is to have it usually be shrouded in some sort of mystery. And the main thing that made Pennywise scary in the first movie, parentheses, in the actual tense scenes, are having knowledge of his power, but no knowledge of his weaknesses, and that he can basically kill any of these kids in brutal ways. But as I slightly alluded to in earlier parts, this is ruined by him having literally the biggest opportunities ever to just kill the main characters, and he will literally just walk away for no reason other than that they're main characters, because whenever it is literally anyone except for them, he is shown to just eat them like a dog and move on with his day. But in both movies, where he's seen with the losers, they would literally be screeching for their life and he just start doing a dance or something. However, it was somewhat excusable in the first film, as these scenes were somewhat kept to a minimum, and it states in the first movie that he doesn't really want to kill if they're together, which is kind of stupid considering his body count, and also the second movie completely contradicts this rule. Not only that, in the sequel, Pennywise is also very unscary, as whatever was even remotely scary in the original is now extremely botched. Like, unironically, look at these PS2 models they used for a horror scene. Not only that, the stakes are completely removed from this movie. The only times people even get killed are from miscellaneous scenes that are completely detached from this movie. And I don't personally believe that there needs to be bloodbaths in a movie in order for scenes to be tense. But when you literally just play scary scene after scary scene for 2 hours straight and only kill people that have zero relation to the rest of the movie, why am I supposed to feel anything if you'd rather just put scary scene after scary scene instead of putting a story, and whenever you do actually kill someone after waiting the entire movie, you show random ass little girl in a drawn out scene getting killed by Pennywise? What the fuck am I supposed to feel? Is this the intended response to watching a girl, I don't know, anything about, put her cheek next to the quote eater of fucking worlds, is go, "No, little girl, please, please run away from Pennywise the dancing clown, please, please." How old do you think I am? 5? Also, speaking of this little girl, notice something about her death scene?
You're supposed to say 3.
When was she scared? When was she screaming, begging for her life like everyone else? What is wrong with So for the people unfamiliar with basic Pennywise lore, this guy literally cannot kill. That is his entire shtick. He is physically unable to harm you if you are not feeling fear. That is the way that they can harm and almost killed Pennywise in the first movie. So he has the power of a reality-shifting eater of worlds as long as he can operate off of fear. Now, It Chapter 2 is very, very, very clearly the sequel to It Chapter 1 because, you know, but I don't think any of the writers remembered any of these rules, as in this movie, Pennywise doesn't seem to operate on either of these logics, and more tends to purely operate off of bullshit. In this movie, Pennywise literally kills and attacks whenever the hell he wants, but he kinda just doesn't wanna kill. The literal only justified kill that Pennywise has is in the first scene to that gay guy who is completely disconnected to the rest of the cast and never brought up. And literally the only time he ends up killing one of the losers, he just kinda does it for no fucking reason. Look at this scene. How did he kill Eddie? And the entire group is there if that even matters. Pennywise is actively injured and he is not scared.
I think I killed it! I did! I think I killed it for real!
But then literally 4 minutes later, Pennywise dies by getting called like a fucking old woman and a quote headless boy. What is he anymore? Is he just an insecure eater of worlds? What if his 7 billion years of existence made him more tolerable than getting called an old woman? How was this the only time in 7 billion years that he died? Now, despite Pennywise being the main selling point of the original movie, the main reason for people saying it was a masterpiece and blah 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 are the characters, which the original handed in, for the most part, a very mature and realistic way, with the losers actually being pretty good actors as well. But the losers in this movie are somehow way worse acted.
What, to like a woman?
Fuck you, bro.
Fuck you!
And the actual characters are so stupid now. I understand that the rules are non-existent in this movie, and the movie uses the very flimsy excuse of, they forgot everything. But not even the kids, the versions of them that were literally like 10, were this stupid when it came to their critical thinking skills. The worst showcase of this is the main reason for the flashbacks, which, you know, consists of 80% of the events in this movie, is because they have a single conversation that goes like this. Okay, Mike, how do we kill it? So, because you guys don't remember how you, killed it, you got to remember your past in dairy. However, to do this, we have to split up. Yeah, you know, realistically, Mike, we should really stick together so we don't get killed by the Eater of Worlds. Yeah, splitting up was actually really stupid. We were all together when we were going against Pennywise. No! Not that whole summer. And then they show a flashback to them splitting up. You didn't answer the question, Mike. Why did they have to split up? You didn't even give a single answer to this. And for those, quote, tokens he was talking about, didn't even matter because at the end of the movie, it's revealed that the artifacts did nothing. So what was the point of the entire movie? Nothing happened. The literal only actual event, different from the events of the original film, is that Pennywise is even more confirmed to be dead, which is basically the impression you get from the first movie, since all of the character arcs have been concluded, and Pennywise was definitely defeated. Now, I genuinely had no idea what had went wrong with this movie, because the first movie was always intended to have a sequel, as has been confirmed by the first movie literally saying it, but genuinely nothing in this sequel is written or feels like the first. Somehow even the CGI is far worse despite the second having more than twice the budget. And as I literally just said, nothing is really ever built upon or happened, so I guess you could say it's a more conclusive way of saying Pennywise died, but like genuinely nothing really changed in the ways that this couldn't have just been some entirely other movie if it didn't have Pennywise. Off of the top of my head, the only thing that I can think of is that Beverly ended up with that one guy, but the first film also ended up with Beverly implied to being with another guy. The repetitiveness goes even more layers, because genuinely the only arcs from this movie are repeated versions from the first movie. Think about it. Bill gets over Georgie by killing him again. Beverly attacks and leaves her dad. The fat kid gets a crush on and tries to flirt with Beverly, and nobody else really gets much of an arc. But anyway, I know this maybe possibly could be played by devil's advocate, saying that this is how they get their stupid artifacts or whatever, and that still really wouldn't change much towards the point, but this is still incredibly stupid, as first of all, this would only work for Bill, as Beverly's artifact is about the fat kid's note, so she had no reason ever to repeat the shit, and second, that is just not how forgetting works. Once you forget where you left your keys, you don't forget every single experience you have had with keys, and these people aren't forgetting dog shit. They remember it extremely clearly, but they just end up doing the same exact thing from the last movie, which despite all of these forgetting or whatever rules the film established, is astonishingly lazy to make a continuance towards a story and go, oh, everyone forgot, and then go forward to run through the same story just without giving as much of a shit and a higher budget. And third, there's the fat kid. The fat kid is generally the stupidest fucking thing in this entire movie. So his character obviously lacked dairy and is a businessman in a mansion who's now extremely fit and tall and whatever. But oh my god, is he creepy in this movie. So in the very first scene, he is seen rubbing a torn out page of his yearbook signed by 13-year-old Beverly that he put in his wallet. This like 40-year-old man or some shit deadass has this girl that he last saw when she was 13's fucking note in his wallet, crushing over this girl, and you can't even say, oh, he doesn't know who this girl who he has some shit signed from 27 years ago, which is still weird, and why would you have that in your wallet still? But this motherfucker dead ass admits,
This is a page from my yearbook. Only one person signed. Probably should have forgotten it, but I couldn't because I kept it in my wallet for 27 years.
she was never affected in his memory by the Pennywise dementia, and said that he knew it was weird, but he kept it in his wallet for 27 years. And after this, the literal, like, entire movie, he's crushing on her every single scene they interact. He's like either, please freaking kiss me, or giving flirtatious stares the whole movie. He doesn't even have, like, a single conversation that doesn't revolve around him making out with her. His character has never done anything in 2 movies other than want to date Beverly. Nobody's obsession should be this bad. And what's even more funny, she literally is like fantasizing with Bill and makes out with him, implying that we're gonna have a romance just as adults. But then when he's like admitting that he kept the yearbook for like 30 years, she's like, oh, that's so sweet, I like him now. And then like 10 minutes later, she goes like, oh yeah, you wrote that love note, and then they make out. That is not how relationships work. Relationships do not depend on a singular love note on who you like go into a relationship with. Nobody would not find that creepy to obsess over someone you knew for like a month when they were 13. It's literally so bad that his flashback is still about Beverly, and Pennywise reveals that like his fucking deepest, darkest fear is Beverly not wanting to date him because he's fat in an imaginary dream. That is not sweet. That is the worst parasocial obsession ever, where his only traits is being scared of Beverly thinking he's, quote, a fatty loser. For over 3 decades. That is a worse insecurity than fucking Pennywise dying from being called an old woman or some shit. Damn. But something even I had asked for a while and that you may be wondering, how did everything go so fucking wrong? So in accompany to watching It Chapter 2, I had gone and seen the behind the scenes footage of both films to possibly understand what had gone wrong in the process of the film, as getting caught up in easy logic confusion shouldn't really be happening in simple high-budget films such as this. And after watching, it really wasn't much of a shock why the film had ended up this way. Now, something I've yet to bring up is the editing. So obviously, if you're not acquainted with movie terms, there's a bunch of cuts and scenes and footage that is all taken into an editing room to smash it all together into a simultaneous storyline. And despite this seemingly not being a big deal usually, as everything else is already finished, as shown from this movie is a way bigger issue than is usually seen, as It Chapter 2 is practically nonsensical in its structure, both from a visual and likely a narrative standpoint. Now obviously the cinematography isn't special in the movie, but whoever was cooking up on their copy of fucking iMovie makes some scenes either very overstimulating from like a billion different cuts, or makes the scenes way more on the nose than it needed to be. So as it's been shown, the finished product of this movie is more like a smush sequence of a bunch of boring, scary events. But likely one of the major factors to this is the way that the film was edited, which ended up making most scenes extremely incomplete, at most points even making it difficult to understand the intent. Take this scene with this kid in the mirror room. First off, I don't know whose fault this actually is, but in the space where the kid is found, he is literally blocked on all four sides of the mirror when he literally just walked in there. And then after that, Pennywise starts slamming his head onto the mirror, and literally like every time there's a single scene with something scary in the movie, it will repeatedly show someone screaming in a reaction shot, which Pennywise will still not use as an opportunity to kill anyone, but this is the main thing this film does in every fucking scary scene. Anytime something remotely disturbing is happening, it will cut away immediately to show someone's reaction, as if any time Pennywise is on the screen for the footage they recorded, they will lose $100,000 each second where there is not a cutaway. Oh wait, yeah. There's another really annoying thing this film does, where to hide imperfections by making the scenes dark or anything they don't want to animate properly, they'll put flashing strobe lights in the room for CGI heavy scenes, and it still looks like shit. This is obviously most heavily used for the final scene, as literally everything is VFX. And is the main reason why I felt like I had to put a seizure warning at the start. But this is relevant because when Pennywise kills in this scene or does other stuff in other scenes, they'll use the strobes to their benefit so that the things that are actually happening don't look as insanely sloppy as they actually are. Like how when Pennywise finally breaks the glass with the boy there and goes to kill him, there's literally 3 separate shots that go off all in a similar time span for some reason. And 0 of them were edited to where Pennywise was even close to being the same position as he was before. I get it. I know this is nitpicking and that's not what defines a film's quality, but there's just so many errors everywhere. There's nothing to focus on because there's no substance to the actual film. Look at how this transition looks. It looks like shit. Look how this was edited. Look how this VFX looks. Look at the obvious inconsistencies. It's all shit. Now going back, I had also seen the behind the scenes for the first movie just because I was curious. And I really don't like saying how I view people's emotional state over the internet, especially when it's based off of literally only an hour worth of footage. But at least to me, it's very clear that most of the members of the first film, at least, have genuine emotion and passion for the project. With many members of the cast especially, you can feel that they're genuine friends that are just trying to make the best film they can, with there seemingly being a pretty clear vision for how they wanted the film to turn out as well, with lots of genuine talent. Despite the development's documentation being a bit confusing, it seems like it was a very enjoyable but lengthy project, as the years between when the film started development ranges from about 5 to 8 years. It Chapter 2 on the other hand seems to have the complete opposite development, as first off, nobody seems to know what the hell they want the movie to be.
And I find that really beautiful because the first film and the second film absolutely connect. The first one being learning how to be an adult, and the second film, the adults learning how to be children again.
So obviously the first film had obtained massive amounts of acclaim and popularity, so there's a lot of standards, and as popular movies go for monetary gain, there was probably a giant rush to get the sequel out as movie studios typically go. But now they have a lot more expectations and technical obligations to hurry up on the movie for, such as that they wanted to include the children again for some reason, who were literally just all about to hit puberty as they've stopped filming the first movie. They also promised a second film, and even out of probable underestimation, promised the exact release date for under 2 years from them before a single thing had begun just 2 weeks after It Chapter 1's international release. And obviously to anyone who's ever worked on a 3-hour long highly CGI'd movie to that 900 out of 1200 pages of a book, you'd know it should really be taking more than a year and a few months to make. And obviously to get the movie out, there was a lot of lost passion and confusion with what's even happening, which is shown pretty well through the film's sloppiness and just as well with the behind the scenes videos, with most everyone seeming extremely indifferent about the movie.
That asshole Finn decided to throw my name in the mix. And okay, there's an actor named Finn. He's in Stranger Things. And I know, yes. So Finn said that you should be Richie, and so I'm gonna have you be Richie. You know, okay, cool.
Or just not knowing what the hell they're talking about.
And this is really scary. If you talk about Pennywise's own subconscious, or its own subconscious, maybe wants to die, or it wants to cease to exist. So at the very end of this movie, maybe that was his goal all along. And in that sense, Pennywise wins.
As the behind the scenes goes on, it's very clear that most of them just become practically jaded, with a lot of them usually just saying something about how exhausted they are, which I can't really blame for some of them apparently having 20-hour days, which might be part of the reasoning for the lacking performances and such that are present in the final cut. But one of, if not the main issues of the film were definitely the rushes in the film's progression, as the film's structure is basically the equivalent of 3 hours of nothing while being screamed in your face that something is actually happening. Even if you just look at the trailers and behind the scenes, you'll see there are several sequences that were never even remotely implied to be happening. Just as most scenes that were actually put in, it seems more like bullshit 15-minute scary scene flashback stuff. And the experience becomes that things will basically just happen and you go, okay. And despite not having read the books is where I believe a lot of the faults come from. Because obviously for characters and plots to be interesting, you need to have substance and characteristics to them, which was somewhat dealt with in the original, parentheses on the word somewhat, by having favoritism on the main 3 characters and everyone else just kind of being there. But since the sequel barely has anything designated for any of the characters, it just really doesn't do anything with them. Because of this and the film not being able to become 7 hours, there just seems to be weird and jarring cutoffs to plots and scenes, to the point where it seems like the only sort of structure that they could conjure up is 2 hours of unscary scenes and CGI'd flashbacks, all for it to not even matter at the end. Because of this, whenever they do try like anything that isn't that, it basically just pisses its pants depressingly. And sometimes it will make scenes just become very confusing to see where the fuck they were coming from, such as with Barry and Eddie's relationship. So at the beginning, they literally just talk with each other a little bit, and then it's briefly implied that Barry is a closeted homosexual. And then Barry and Eddie meet up and talk again for a tiny bit before fighting Pennywise at the end of the film. And then Eddie dies with Barry weirdly seeming the most distraught, screaming for them to try and find a way to save him. And he literally just starts carving his dead straight friend's name on the childhood ridge thingy, shipping each other, implying they had somewhat of a romantic relationship or connection, though neither of them have ever shown any romantic feelings or basically feelings at all. And he smiles. And I think you might be missing a few little plot threads in chapter 2. Maybe just a few, because now this potentially tragic relationship now basically just comes off as an unearned, confusing plot point. Like honestly, from the way the film presents it, there really is just nothing to get out of or feel, considering how you don't even know what happened. What does the carving mean? Is this a reveal that secretly Barry and Eddie were homosexual lovers that never showed the tiniest bit of affection or feelings towards each other across 2 movies? Or maybe it's him realizing he actually loved Eddie all along. Or what if this means that Barry has had a crush on Eddie for 27 years and was too scared to tell him and he's devastated over it? Or could it be that Barry is actually a bad person that has a parasocial obsession with some random straight dead dude? I don't know. There's a difference between leaving something up to interpretation and just not writing your own movie.
Because the first film and the second film absolutely connect.
I literally know nothing about any of these characters, and you're telling me that there's an intended response to feel emotion or gain something for a plotline that wasn't even written. You really are 2 for 2 on relationships, It Chapter 2. Obviously, I don't think anyone in the writers team of It Chapter 2 is acting in bad faith or that literally any of these examples were intentional. And trust me, there are more. But the main reason I believe for the jarring and extremely tone-deaf sequences are just because of the lack of actual developed characters, scenes, or arcs. There's obviously a giant amount the film had to do considering the stuff they had to cover for the book, and the cause of the lack of any finished or polished scenes are likely from them being cut. As looking into the production, it is clear that there's genuinely mountains of cut scenes, concepts, and storylines. And this really does sink into the movie, as scenes will be showing characters in extreme peril and it'll just cut away after a build-up or certain plot threads are never addressed. And really any of these cut features could have been swapped around into the film as the final product, and it still really wouldn't matter, as the final product reveals that at the end of the day it really was a project that was made of obligation rather than any sort of passion. This movie applies to the major hindrance the horror slop genre has had on the art of filmmaking. There was no real development, genuine emotion, nor even really much of a purpose for this film. Most of the potentials from the first movie, which was just an adaptation of a highly regarded book, was stripped for profit, such as most films in this genre. And as more of these blockbuster slop films are produced, the lower the standard will again become for a film. There are definitely worse movies out there, even worse horror movies, but I figured this film was a prime example of substanceless films that weren't made out of any real passion being praised. Purposeless art that says thousands of nothings is what the standard of the story is. This ideology is actively hurting the artists that may care about what they're producing rather than gaining. That is why I hate this film. It is a regurgitation of a regurgitation that made $500 million. Appreciate those who offer an actual film rather than a product. But yeah, that's my thoughts for the most part. Take a shot every time a character says, I sure wish that doesn't happen, and the thing happens. Good night, chat. 2 out of 10.